The fire is already lit. Sit down, breathe, and listen. Sarah checked her phone for the 10th time in 15 minutes. No response. The message had been delivered at 2:37 p.m., and now, 3 hours later, her mind was running a program she knew all too well. What if I said something wrong? What if she misunderstood? What if I should have used different words? Carl Jung spent decades studying minds like Sarah's, and he discovered something that will completely change how you see that voice in your head that never stops analyzing, questioning, predicting. You're not overthinking. Your mind is trying to save you. In this video, you'll discover why what people call overthinking is actually a sophisticated protection mechanism your psyche developed, and how a wound you might not even remember anymore created a mental bodyguard that never went off duty. But first, I need to ask you a disturbing question. What if your mind is right about the danger? Sarah always believed she had a problem. "I overthink," she would tell friends, with that tone of someone apologizing for existing. Society taught you that being an overthinker is a character flaw, as if you consciously chose to torture yourself with infinite analysis, as if it were mental laziness or lack of discipline. But Jung had a completely different view. For him, the psyche never does anything without purpose. Every mental pattern, however destructive it may seem, exists to protect you from something. Sarah didn't have a defect, she had a defense system. When you were a child and someone reacted badly to something you said, your mind registered, "Words can hurt. I need to choose better next time." When you were rejected after opening up, it noted, "Vulnerability is dangerous. I need to calculate before exposing myself." Your mind isn't trying to drive you crazy, it's trying to keep you safe. But there's a price for living with a mental bodyguard that never rests. Sarah discovered this on an ordinary Tuesday. She had spent the entire morning planning a 5-minute conversation with her boss. She analyzed every possible reaction from him, prepared responses to objections that might not even arise, reformulated her approach 7 times. When the conversation finally happened, it lasted 3 minutes and was perfectly calm. But Sarah was exhausted, not physically, mentally. Neuroscience discovered something fascinating. Overthinking consumes the same mental energy you would use to solve real problems. Your mind doesn't distinguish between an imaginary threat and a real one. For it, anticipating embarrassment is as exhausting as living through it. Sarah wasn't tired from working too much. She was tired from living each day twice, once in her head, once in reality. Sarah's mind functioned like an alarm system that could no longer distinguish between a real fire and coffee smoke. An email from her boss would put her on maximum alert. A delayed response from a friend would trigger emergency protocols. A change in someone's facial expression would activate deep analysis about what this means. Stephen Porges, a neuroscientist who studied the nervous system for decades, discovered something Jung already intuited. We have a system called neuroception, the unconscious ability to detect safety or danger in the environment. In people like Sarah, this system was calibrated to constant danger mode, not out of paranoia, out of experience. At some point in her life, Sarah's mind learned that the world is unpredictable and that she needed to always be one step ahead to avoid pain. So she developed an emotional hypervigilance that never turned off again. Sarah didn't choose to live this way. Her mind chose for her, trying to ensure she would never be caught off guard again. Carl Jung had a name for this: autonomous complex. A part of the psyche that becomes autonomous, takes control, and operates independently of conscious will, as if a younger version of you had taken the reins of your mind and never given them back. Sarah began to notice this when she realized there was a specific voice in her head. Not a literal voice, but a thought pattern that always said the same things. What if it goes wrong? What if they don't like it? What if you talked too much? What if you didn't talk enough? This voice wasn't her. It was the vigilant complex that formed to protect her. Jung discovered that these complexes behave like independent personalities within the psyche. They have their own objectives, their own memories, their own survival strategies. Sarah's complex had only one job: to ensure she would never again go through the pain of being rejected, misunderstood, or abandoned. And it was very, very good at what it did. Sarah couldn't remember exactly when it started. Maybe it was at 7, when she said something in class and the other children laughed. Maybe at 10, when she told her mother the truth about what she had done wrong and was still punished and oppressed for months. Maybe at 12, when she opened up to a friend and the friend told everyone. Maybe at 15, when she was rejected by her first love. Or maybe it was a sum of all the small moments, micro-rejections that accumulated until her mind concluded the world isn't safe. I need to analyze everything before acting. Jung observed that most complexes form in childhood or adolescence, in moments of emotional vulnerability. A part of us freezes at that age and never grows up. Sarah's vigilant complex had the emotional age of the first time she felt completely exposed and unprotected. And since then, that part of her never stopped trying to rewrite that moment. Never stopped trying to ensure she was prepared for anything that could hurt her. Sarah wasn't thinking about the future. She was reliving the past infinitely. The psyche always compensates, Jung wrote in his personal journals. What he meant is that when something becomes unbalanced in our psychic life, the mind unconsciously develops a mechanism to restore balance. Sarah felt too vulnerable? The mind compensated by creating hypervigilance. Sarah was caught off guard? The mind compensated by developing the ability to anticipate infinite scenarios. Sarah felt she had no control? The mind compensated by trying to control every possible variable through thought. Overthinking wasn't a bug in Sarah's mental system. It was a feature, a protective function her psyche developed to compensate for a feeling of helplessness. Jung realized that attacking these patterns head-on rarely works because you're fighting against the mechanism the mind itself created to protect you. It's like fighting your own immune system. Sarah's mind wasn't trying to harm her, it was trying to save her, using the only tools it knew. That night, sitting by the fire, Jung whispered something that changed everything. You're not planning the future, you're reliving the past. Sarah finally understood. Every scenario her mind created, every what-if that kept her awake, every infinite analysis of a conversation, they weren't about what could happen. They were about what had already happened. When she anticipated rejection, she was reliving all the times she was rejected. When she analyzed every word of an email, she was trying to rewrite all the times she said something wrong. When she obsessively prepared for social situations, she was trying to avoid reliving the pain of not belonging. Her mind had become a psychological time machine, trapped between a past that hurts
and a future it fears. Overthinking wasn't about control, it was about healing. Her mind was desperately trying to heal old wounds, using each new situation as an opportunity to finally get it right. But emotional wounds don't heal in the future or the past. They heal in the present.
But then Sarah had a terrifying thought. What if my mind is right? What if there really is something I need to fear? Because here's the most brutal truth about overthinking. Sometimes it's right. Sometimes people really will judge you for what you say. Sometimes they will reject you if you show yourself too vulnerable. Sometimes you really will say the wrong thing at the wrong time. Sarah realized she was trapped in an impossible paradox. Her mind protected her from real pain, but the protection itself had become constant pain. Living anticipating rejection was almost as painful as being rejected. Living analyzing every interaction was almost as exhausting as living with the consequences of not analyzing. Her mind had created a prison made of prevention, and Sarah was simultaneously the prisoner and the guard. Jung called this identification with the complex, when you become so attached to the protection mechanism that you can no longer distinguish between who you are and what you do to protect yourself. Sarah began to perceive the difference between wisdom and worry. Wisdom was when her mind actually detected something important, an incongruence in someone's voice, a subtle change in behavior, a pattern that deserved attention. Worry was when her mind took a neutral situation and transformed it into a potential emotional catastrophe. The difference was in the quality of energy. Wisdom came accompanied by clarity and action. Worry came accompanied by anxiety and paralysis. Wisdom moved you forward. Worry kept you stuck in the same place, spinning in circles. Sarah learned to ask a simple question: is this worry helping me act or preventing me from acting? If the answer was preventing, she knew she was dealing with the vigilant complex, not real intuition. Jung always said that true intuition is silent and clear. Overthinking is noisy and confusing. There's a thin line between processing an experience and getting stuck in it. Sarah discovered that processing happens when you analyze something with the goal of understanding and moving forward. Ruminating happens when you analyze something infinitely without ever reaching a conclusion. Processing has a beginning, middle, and end. Ruminating is an infinite loop. Processing makes you wiser. Ruminating makes you more anxious. Jung observed that the healthy mind naturally processes emotional experiences and then archives them. But when there's an unhealed wound, the mind gets stuck on certain memories or patterns, trying to resolve them through mental repetition. Sarah realized that her overthinking was actually a desperate attempt to solve past experiences that still hurt. But some wounds don't heal through thinking. They heal through conscious experience, acceptance, and sometimes the help of other people. Her mind was trying to do alone a job that might need company, an outside view to help her see inside.
Jung always believed that healing begins with dialogue. Not dialogue with other people, although that's also important, but internal dialogue between you and the parts of you that took control. Sarah learned to talk to her vigilant complex as if it were a real person, because psychologically it was. "Thank you for trying to protect me," she would say mentally. "I see that you're scared. I understand why you don't want me to be hurt again. But now I'm an adult. I can handle some disappointments. You can relax a little." What happened was surprising. The more she acknowledged the complex's positive intention, the less it needed to work so intensely. It's like calming a frightened child. You don't fight with them for being scared. You reassure them until they feel safe enough to calm down. Jung discovered that complexes respond to compassion, not force. Sarah learned a delicate art, honoring the intention of her vigilant complex without being dominated by it. When she felt that familiar spiral of thoughts beginning, she would pause and ask, "What are you trying to protect me from now?" Sometimes it was fear of rejection, sometimes fear of disappointment, sometimes fear of not being good enough. Recognizing fear doesn't mean agreeing with it. It simply means seeing that it exists and has a positive intention. Jung always said that what we resist persists, but what we accept transforms. Sarah stopped fighting against her overthinking and began working with it. When her mind started creating catastrophic scenarios, she would say, "I see that you're worried. How about we create just two scenarios? One realistic optimistic and one realistic challenging, and then we decide how to act." Her mind accepted the negotiation. Instead of 100 chaotic scenarios, she began creating just two useful ones. Jung realized that we live in the era of collective hypervigilance. Never before in human history have we been exposed to so much information, so many opinions, so many simultaneous possibilities. Our minds, which evolved to deal with tribes of 150 people, now need to process the emotional energy of thousands through social media. Overthinking isn't an individual epidemic, it's a collective response to a world that has become emotionally overloaded. Freud talked about civilization and its discontents. Jung expanded this idea, showing that many of our psychological symptoms are actually attempts by the psyche to adapt to a world that changed faster than our emotional evolution. Sarah wasn't alone. Millions of people like her developed vigilant complexes to survive in a reality that demands more than our emotional nature was designed to handle. Overthinking is often the silent cry of a psyche trying to process more stimuli than it can integrate. And maybe the real cure isn't to stop thinking. It's to learn to think more compassionately. That night, Sarah did something she hadn't done in years. She sent a message to a friend without rereading it, 3 times. Not because she stopped caring, but because she finally understood that her mind was on her side, not against her. The overthinking didn't disappear, but it changed in quality. Instead of a chaotic storm, it became a conscious breeze. Sarah learned that peace doesn't come from silencing the mind. It comes from understanding that everything it does has a loving intention, even when the execution is imperfect. Jung knew this. That's why he never tried to cure his patients' complexes. He helped them dialogue with them, understand them, integrate them. The mind that protects you isn't your enemy. It just needs to learn that you've grown up, and that now you can protect yourself in gentler ways. That night, I understood everything, and since then, whenever the world weighs heavy, I return to the fire. See you soon.